Good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that we're gathered on Treaty 1 in Dakota First Nations territory and the traditional homeland of the Métis Nation. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us as we provide you with an update on matters related to the protest in the area of the Manitoba Legislature. I'm joined by Chief Danny Smyth, who will be able to provide an update on Winnipeg Police Service operations. I'm also joined by Jay Shaw, manager of the City of Winnipeg's Emergency Operations Center, who will provide an update on other city service impacts. I can advise you that I spoke with Premier Heather Stephenson earlier today. We discussed the need for calm and for us to ensure the lines of communication are open between our governments. Our city's senior officials have been and continue to work with their provincial counterparts to monitor the situation and the impacts to government services. I've spoken recently with Ottawa's Mayor Jim Watson to express my support for his efforts on the ground in our nation's capital. I'm sure the residents of Ottawa appreciate Mayor Watson's leadership in speaking out on their behalf, as do I. Finally, I've also spoken with our Police Board Chair, Councillor Marcus Chambers, who, like Winnipeggers, is monitoring the situation as it unfolds. I want to thank our public service for their ongoing efforts on behalf of the residents of Winnipeg. By way of an update, traffic has been impacted in our downtown, so if you have to be in the area, I'd encourage you to please monitor the city's Transportation Management Center on social media. Our officials in the Transportation Management Center are providing updates for commuters. The city is monitoring the situation closely, especially for the maintenance of access for emergency services. I've seen some reports of temporary business disruptions. That's not something we want to see in the longer term. Businesses have been hit particularly hard during the pandemic, and we don't want to see additional and prolonged disruptions for our local businesses. It's important to note this is not the first protest in our city during the pandemic. As a community, we respect the right of Canadians to protest peacefully and lawfully. In doing so, there is a recognition that there may be temporary disruptions to certain city services and operations and to our residents. I'll now hand things over to Chief of Police Danny Smyth for an update from a police perspective, followed by Jay Shaw, manager of the City of Winnipeg's Emergency Operations Center, for an update on the impacts to city services. Over to you, Chief Smyth.
Muted.
Sorry, didn't know I was in charge of that. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mayor Bowman. The protest organizers have been working cooperatively with the police on this event. I can tell you that as of about a half an hour ago, there were about between 50 and 70 vehicles in and around Broadway and Memorial Boulevard. It's a mix of semi trucks, passenger vehicles, and I understand a couple of farm-type tractors. We've experienced no real problems right now. We still have traffic moving on Broadway and on York, going east and west. We have allowed the protesters to utilize Memorial Boulevard to stage to some degree from Broadway to York. At this time, the organizers have been quite cooperative with the police, and we are coexisting there, and they are facilitating their protest peacefully at this point. I don't really have anything more to add at this time, so I'll turn it over to Jay.
Thank you, Chief. Good afternoon. I'm Jay Shaw. I'm the Assistant Chief of Emergency Management for the City of Winnipeg. At this point, we are pleased to report that there have been very few impacts to city services. Winnipeg Transit has had to reroute some of its routes in the affected area near the legislative buildings and has expected some delays during the afternoon rush hour. We advise transit users to check their schedules before riding. As the Mayor and Police Chief have mentioned, traffic in the area around the legislative is moving and flowing, but still flowing slowly. So if possible, please avoid the area. However, if you do need to travel in the area, please be patient. And finally, I can advise that we are not seeing any impacts at this time on responses for emergency vehicles, such as fire apparatus or ambulances. Thank you, and we'll turn it back over for questions.
First, we'll go to Sam Sampson from CBC.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Thanks for doing this. Mayor Bowman, you mentioned, impacts to businesses in the area. It's not something you want to see in the long run. What do you mean about that? What are you concerned about that you felt that you had to say that today?
Well, I don't think anyone wants to see what has happened in Ottawa. We always have had protests in our city that often will cause temporary disruptions to traffic. I've certainly seen those over my terms of office to date, and I think we need to recognize that city officials, provincial officials are doing their best to ensure the safety of everyone while respecting the right of folks to peacefully and lawfully protest. I think what we just don't want to see is prolonged disruptions to our residents who live downtown, local businesses that have been temporarily affected. And so hopefully the disruptions will be minimal and short-lived.
Thank you for that. I guess this next question is for anyone who can answer then. What's the threshold? As we've seen in Ottawa, it's gone on, the protest there has gone on for days. So at what point does perhaps law enforcement or the city step in to prevent disruptions to not only people who work in the area and have businesses, but who live in the area?
I can maybe start. So there, provided there, it's always, of course, respecting the rights of folks to respectfully, or I should say, to peacefully protest. We see that all over Canada from time to time, and that's part of being in a free and democratic society. It's, of course, where there's prolonged disruptions to the rights that our residents have to obviously exercise their mobility rights and other rights to live their lives. And so we aren't seeing that at this stage. And so, I think it's important to note that, the conditions on the ground in respective communities will be that. They'll be unique to their communities. And at this stage, there's been some temporary disruptions, but they have not been significant to date. And hopefully that's what we see going forward.
Danielle from the Winnipeg Free Press.
Thanks. My questions are for Chief Smyth. So you said the police service is working cooperatively with the organizers. How long have they told you that they intend to be in the vicinity or do the kind of intermittent blockade?
I don't have any information on what the intent of the organizers is in terms of the length of time they plan on staying.
What is the service preparing for? How long are you preparing to respond to the protest? And can you describe the resources and the allocations that are required?
So we'll work with the organizers as long as we need to. At the present time, the resources being required to manage this event are modest.
James from the Winnipeg Sun.
Good afternoon, everyone. Just a quick question for Chief Smyth and a question for the mayor. Just wondering if there are any plainclothes officers on site today.
So typically an operational question like that involves tactics, I wouldn't respond to, and I won't today either.
Fair enough. Mr. Mayor, I'm just wondering, being out watching the protest this morning, seems like a lot of desperation. Just wondering, is there any sympathy for some of these folks who feel that they've, reached the limit?
Look, I think there's no doubt the pandemic has been difficult for all Canadians, most notably those that have had their health impacted or have lost loved ones, also those that are caring for our residents in our hospitals. And so Obviously we want to see a demonstration of patience and kindness with each other right now. I think the message of freedom is one that has been answered. People do have the freedom to get their vaccine or not. There are consequences, of course, with that, most notably to one's health. And so, again, the ability for people to peacefully protest is one that Canadians have the right to expect. Where it starts infringing on other Canadians' rights, that's where we'll obviously have issues. But at this stage, based on the updates that we have at this hour, the disruptions have been, not significant.
Thank you.
Devin from CTV.
Good afternoon. First question here for Mayor Bowman. We were seeing some employees in City of Winnipeg trucks that were appearing to show support for those at the protest. Just what do you think of that happening?
You know what? I haven't received that information, so it's something we can certainly look into. If you can provide more information to us, we can always look into that. But that is not something that I'm aware of, so I'm not able to provide you with immediate comment.
Okay, and second question here for Chief Smyth. You said you don't know exactly how long this protest is going to be, or if it's going to be continuing for more than today, but if this does go into the evening, will the horns be stopping tonight once it reached that certain hour?
I can't speculate on what's going to happen in the future. The organizers have been pretty open with our members on the ground and pretty cooperative. We'll just play it as it comes.
Mark from City TV.
Thanks for being available, everyone. I guess maybe this would be to either the mayor or Chief Danny Smyth. If organizers have been in contact with you, have they made any direct demands in terms of what they would want for this protest action to end in Winnipeg?
Go ahead, Mayor.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't had any direct contact with them, so I'm not able to answer that question. So I'll turn it over to you, Chief.
And in terms of our interaction with, we're just there to make sure that people are able to demonstrate peacefully and that the disruptions are minimized as much as possible. They haven't shared any demands with us.
Okay, thank you. I guess, Mayor, I'd be curious, in your own opinion, in your feelings, does a protest like this do anything to, impact how you may view current public health measures or vaccine mandates? Do you think it will be effective in changing some of the pre-existing stances on the COVID-19 health and safety protocol?
Short answer is no. I think the protesters are making their views clear, and they're entitled to do so. It's my hope and expectation that all levels of government will guide decisions around vaccines and other COVID public health measures based on the best advice from healthcare professionals that are grounded in science and fact. And so, I think that's where those decisions should be made. And I'll continue to support decisions that are made on the basis of the advice from healthcare professionals. That being said, Canadians will have and do have the ability and the right to share their views on what they think of those measures. But it's my hope and expectation that all levels of government will continue to support and be guided going forward based on the best advice from healthcare professionals.
Brittany from Global.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. Thanks so much for taking the time this afternoon. Mayor Bowman, I just wanted to get your thoughts on what you've seen so far from the protest, and maybe Chief Smyth as well. The difference in what you're seeing, or are you seeing one, what we're seeing here in Winnipeg compared to what we're seeing in protests in other cities, and how you're feeling about that so far?
Well, I'm appreciative of the work that's being undertaken by our public service, including the Winnipeg Police Service. I'm appreciative of the work that's going on with other levels of government, including the provincial government. We'll have to see how things unfold. But at this stage, based on the information we have, it's been peaceful, and that's what we want to continue to see. And we want to see the least impact on the ability for our residents to go about their daily lives. And so, you know, hopefully that will that'll be the path forward.
Thank you. And I guess I don't know if this is maybe for you or maybe for Chief Smyth. There's been concerns in Ottawa that police and the city there let things get too far and are getting a bit out of control. What kind of contingency plans are in place here if this continues to go forward past just this one day?
Is that for me?
Sure.
I guess first I would say that every protest and every location is unique in its own right. And it's probably not fair to be comparing us to Ottawa at the moment. We have an open dialogue going with the organizers that are here on the ground locally. They have been very open with us and to date, and we're only into it by 6 hours or so, very cooperative with us. So, you know, I don't think it's a fair comparison looking at Ottawa.
Anne from Radio Canada.
Hi. My question is for Danny Smyth. Oh no, I'm sorry, for Mr. Bowman, but as well, they could be as well for two. Since you've met with the mayor of the city of Ottawa, what have you discussed about, and was that concerning a plan to prevent what is happening right now in Ottawa?
So I speak regularly with mayors across the country. You know, these kinds of protests are happening in other locations as well. My primary reason for connecting with Mayor Watson was to just offer support and also to just see how he was doing. It's obviously not an ideal situation right now in Ottawa. You know, one of the things we just discussed is, you know, the fact that people have the lawful right to protest, but it's a challenge when those protests begin in a lengthy way, adversely affecting local businesses. And so we just talked about that. Again, wanted to just offer my support to him. I know it's not an easy situation right now, and appreciative of the work of the public service in Ottawa and the Capital Region, respective agencies I know are doing their best.
Thank you. And for now, do you have an estimate of the number of people that have participated in the protest today and the people that will come during the next day, probably?
I'm sorry, were you asking for an estimate of what's going on at the moment?
An estimate of the number of people. You've said a number of trucks, but do you have an estimate of number of people?
Yeah, we estimate between 50 and 70 vehicles that are down on the site right now. I'm not sure what that equates to in terms of people. Most of the people are in their vehicles, from my understanding. So it's been very manageable at the moment. The biggest preventative thing that we have going for us is an ongoing dialogue with the organizers so that everybody understands their rights and what the expectations are.
Thank you.
Sam from CBC, did you have any final questions?
I do, yes. This is for Chief Smyth. The Winnipeg City Council put out a joint statement condemning the use of racist symbols and comments during the protests, not only here in Manitoba, but across Canada. And I'm wondering if you'd like to offer comment on the Winnipeg Police Service's point of view on the use of those images during these protests.
Yeah, I would share in that position. I don't think equating what's going on here with symbols of oppression and Nazism is appropriate, and I share that sentiment.
Okay, thank you. And the other question I have, I saw the police service tweeted that protesters got everybody to sign a code of conduct to participate in it. Do you have any information on what's in that code of conduct? Was that shared with police?
I was aware that they had set up a code of conduct amongst themselves. I've not seen it myself, but I was certainly informed of it. So I don't know what specifically is in the code of conduct, but again, my understanding is it's their ability to demonstrate to us that they're there peacefully.
And just my other question. I know it seems like a basic question, but what does it mean for protesters to cooperate with police? Many people may not have even participated in protests before. They might not understand what that looks like. So from your point of view, what does cooperating mean and look like?
So typically when we become aware of any kind of demonstration or protest, generally speaking, we'll reach out to the organizers so that they understand what their constitutional rights are around protesting, but also an understanding of how we can assist them in keeping safe. Often protests take place in public spaces and on public roadways, so we want to assist organizers so that they can demonstrate in a way that doesn't jeopardize their own safety or the safety of other people. So that's first and foremost. Generally speaking, we reach out to offer our assistance so that people can protest, as is their right, in a safe and peaceful manner. And if there's anything that we can do to facilitate that, we will. Conversely, we want to make sure that they understand that they can't break the law per se. We don't want to see anything escalate that would become unsafe or unruly.
Danielle from the Winnipeg Free Press.
Thanks. So this one is for Chief Smyth and for Jay Shaw. So what are your biggest concerns operationally if the demonstration does go for an extended period of time?
From my perspective, it would be just the disruption for the people and the businesses operating in the area. We recognize that in a democratic society, we put up with some disruption for protest, but it would be hard for the people that live and work in that area.
And I would just echo what Chief Smyth is saying in terms of the impacts to residents and possibly some, when we look at critical infrastructure in terms of access to for emergency services, we just want everyone to stay safe. So.
Thanks. And I do have a couple more. I was just wanting to confirm whether the WPS have received any complaints related to the demonstration so far, or if there have been any reports of altercations between folks.
We have not.
James from the Winnipeg Sun. James has left. Devin from CTV.
Just one more for Chief Smyth here. I know you've said that you're not really sure how long they could be around protesting, but if they are around for the weekend, what are the plans moving forward for Saturday and Sunday?
It would be more of the same. We would keep an ongoing dialogue with the organizers to ensure that everyone proceeds safely and that we minimize the disruptions as much as we can.
That's everything. Thank you.
Brittany from Global.
I'm good. Thank you very much.
Anne from Radio Canada.
No question. Thank you.
I'll just check one more time. Sam from CBC, are you good?
No, I have one more question, please. This is for Mayor Bowman. You mentioned you spoke with Premier Stephenson earlier today. You said about the need for calm. I'm just wondering if you can elaborate on that, why that came up.
I think there's just a recognition that the issues that are being discussed right now in some of these protests are very emotional. And I think what is important for our residents to know is that government officials are doing their best to respect the rights of our residents, both those protesting and, and as well as Winnipeggers themselves who, may not share the views of those protesting. And so, primarily, I want to just ensure the lines of communication are open. Hopefully, they're not needed for a very long time. We do talk regularly, and we'll talk as needed throughout the weekend and into next week. But I wanted to convey to her our appreciation for the work that her officials are doing right now in and around the legislature, as well as the work that's being undertaken by the City of Winnipeg personnel, including both Jay Shaw and Chief Smyth and all of their team members. I think, in terms of, some of the images that we saw in our community last week, which, our council has unanimously condemned, what we're seeing in Ottawa in terms of the prolonged nature and some of the pretty significant disruptions to the ability for the city and its residents to go about their businesses. We just want to ensure that there is calm right now, that we recognize the lawful ability for peaceful protest, but also that those temporary disruptions shouldn't be prolonged. And so we'll obviously just keep those lines of communication open as they have in recent weeks since she became premier, but certainly with what we're seeing in other cities, I wanted to ensure the lines of communication were open with the premier, and she's obviously in agreement with that.
Thank you.
Okay, no problem.
Danielle from the Free Press, did you have any more questions?
No, I'm good, thank you.
And last one, Devin from CTV, did you have any further questions?
No, I'm good, thank you.
All right, I believe then that concludes our press conference.
I still have a question.
Oh, sorry, Mark. Okay, we'll go to you.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask, there's a very prominent and massive American flag next to a Canadian one. Do you know if any of the protesters have come from the United States to Winnipeg for this?
I certainly can't speak to that. I would presume, based on what we've heard, there's a number of non-Winnipeggers that are at the protest. That's they have the ability. People have the right to travel, and I can't explain why there's such a large American flag there. But again, people have the ability to have a flag of that nature, and but I couldn't speak to where people's residency or citizenship is.
Chief Smyth, any chance you would know?
No, I'm not aware of the origins of any of the protesters.
Thank you.
All right, now
Okay.
I believe that concludes our press conference. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Jay Shaw. Have a great weekend, everybody. Merci, Miigwech.